Makusa, mamaku, mamasa, makumakusa, mamaku, mamasa, mamamakusa.
Good afternoon. This is Tempo Afric TV's Beyond the Headline program, and I'm your host, Petros Haile. Beyond the Headlines is a Pan-African news and information program designed to serve and promote alternative views. Our topic of discussion for today is Arm in Arm in Africa, South Africa mission. And to help us understand the history and the present situation of the relief activity, we have Reverend James Cassidy, founder of Arm in Arm in Africa, and we also have Daryl Savage, a board member of Arm in Arm in Africa. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon, Petros.
Good afternoon.
So I'll go directly to the question. The first one is, what is the history behind Arm in Arm in Africa? How did it start? I believe you've had 20 years of experience. So should I start with James?
You can start with, thank you, Petros. Okay. It's most appropriate that you're providing an alternative view in your program because in a very real way, that describes a part of our history. So Arm in Africa actually started in 2000, and we'll say more about that earlier. Okay. But the background for me personally was in 1981, again, the HIV pandemic here in the US. I was very involved in a lot of fundraising, a lot of developing services for people with HIV. It was a challenging time. It was an alternative view, if you will, to be able to do that. So from 1981 all the way up to 2000, when Arm in Africa started, that was a lot of my involvement was here in the US with HIV.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Daryl, you want to add a little bit to it?
Well, I was so enthralled with Jim's vision and his desire to make an impact, to hear what he was experiencing, what he was seeing, was something that made me want to do more and to take action. When I think about the images he shared to those of us who were friends of his, of seeing people lined up for funerals that lasted for much longer than what we would call city blocks, 2 to 3 football fields of a cemetery in size, with people lined up to bury people who had died from AIDS, HIV. And to me, that's something, an image that I will never forget. And to know that in those communities in South Africa, where he was trying to do what he could to help the people there, and to hear that the most aggressive medication to treat it at that time was a multivitamin, was something that led me to think, I have to do more to make a difference. And I thank Jim for that and the impact that made for those of us who heard his stories.
Okay, thank you. So was that the reaction? Were you shocked to see South African experience for the first time?
I would say, Petros, I think it was important to note too, from 1981 to 2000, when we decided to go, we were had been so steeped in the AIDS pandemic. Interestingly enough, it was a pandemic that actually took us to South Africa the first time. As of 2021, there had been 36 million people had died of AIDS. And we had lived that experience all the way from 1981 to 1980. So in 2020, I decided that it was time that I needed to learn a bit more about the international face of AIDS. And so at that time, going there in 2019, I realized that an estimated 60% of all women living in the communities were HIV positive. And that's after we had been there for 19 years. We arrived in the fall of 2000, and pretty much with just HIV on our minds, thinking that that's what was going to bring us to South Africa. Mm-hmm. So that was our sole intent in getting there. And the rest is, there's a lot of history then after we arrived in 2000.
Oh, okay, thank you. While I was going through your website, I noticed that you what you call the 3 pillars, which is healthcare, education, and food distribution. How did you come up to that conclusion, and what are they? Why are you picking those 3 items as a 3 pillars?
Well, Petros, what I would say is I would ask our viewers to imagine a 3-legged stool. A 3-legged stool in which one is healthcare, another is education, and another is food distribution. When you think about a stool, if it doesn't have those 3 legs, it is going to collapse. It's going to topple. And that's what we saw. And it's the reason that we felt that all 3 of these pillars need to be an integral part of what we do. When you think about it, without healthcare, there's little to no hope. It's all about survival, basic needs only. Who's thinking about an education when mortality is so high? And then when you think about a child who arrives at school who is in pain or hungry, there is no success in education because that's not the focus. And it brings us back to food. Without food, it's just about getting to the end of the day, one day at a time. Long-term illnesses come from no food or diseased food, and starvation can kill people before they'll ever get to the need of a long period of healthcare. So without any of those 3, the other 2 can collapse, kind of like a house of cards. And why put good intentions and focus and money and support behind something that's not going to stand up, because with just 2 pillars, it's not going to be sustainable. And I would say that's why we came as an organization to realize that it really needs to be all 3 of them together.
Okay. On top of that, maybe James can answer this one. Was there a success rate on this one? Have you seen any change while implementing those 3 pillars?
There's been success, but it's important to also maybe touch on some of the backstory of going there. Okay. Realizing instantaneously in getting there that you could not simply focus on one disease, that you needed to deal with unemployment, you needed to do with lack of housing, you needed to do with the lack of education. So a part of, again, going, just thinking about HIV, we needed to learn a lot about the results of apartheid. And I need to just speak a bit about that. That began in 1948, and it was a whole process of, by the white minority government, dismantling the society there and dividing the entire community based on color, which was primarily black, colored, Indian, and white. So apartheid began in 1948, which was long before we got to South Africa, and it really didn't end until the early 90s. So when we first went, we had no idea that we would actually be developing a program. So the development of the program came as a result of seeing how complex the society and the community and the issues were. So many things colliding in the same intersection. So it took us, until we got to that 3-legged stool concept for our program, it took us several years to just immerse ourselves in the community to learn what the effects have been of apartheid. because again, that only ended in 93 approximately. Mandela was elected president in 94. We arrived on the scene in 2000. So there was a certain tightness to that whole experience that we needed to learn a lot. We were very naive, I must admit. We didn't know what we didn't know, and that was a blessing.
Oh, thank you. Well,
Petros,
go ahead.
If I could, I wanted to give a little context there, because what I didn't realize was what apartheid was meant to be by the people who put it into place. So this was government-supported, legalized ability to say, because of the color of people's skin, that they were not fully human beings. And as a result, they were segregated and kept away from each other. Now, I'm going to take a step back, because while the rest of the world in the 1940s were appalled by what was discovered after the end of World War II, there was a group of people who were enamored by that and trying to recreate what they saw in Nazi Germany in South Africa. That's what apartheid is. Apartheid was meant to do that. Thank goodness it didn't go so far as the killing of people to that extent. But I want to make sure that we talk about that so people understand why our passion for it, because that was so damaging to think about. So myself, my wife is white, and my children are biracial. By those rules, we could not be in the same township. So what apartheid did with creating these townships was to take people who were of colored or black, the different ethnicities, and put them in these different areas, evict them from their homes, separate them from family. And because of that, that was a very destructive way to dismantle a lot of the communities in South Africa. And that really is what apartheid was. And even though, as Jim talked about, there, Nelson Mandela, so many people can think about seeing him march out, that is something that has not dramatically impacted the fact that the people there are still recovering from it. And so that's why getting involved is something that we are so passionate about. And it is something that creates this ongoing need to catch up in education, to catch up in healthcare, to catch up in the opportunities that have not been afforded to everyone in the different ethnic groups of South Africa.
So the townships were in disadvantage since the apartheid regime began in 1948, I assume. So it's totally excluded from any form of development.
Absolutely. These townships were areas where people were moved to an area where there was no electricity, there's no sanitation removal, there certainly is no schooling, there's no housing. They were scrounging for thrown away construction items and fabric and plastics and metals. And that is why it has been so difficult for these people to start.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, my next question is about the South African partnership. Okay. The partners that you are working with, I believe you found them very inspirational. And can you say a little bit about how the relationship was between Arm in Arm and the South African partners?
Sure, Petros. I think the real key to the success, and very much in stark contrast to their history, is to develop the partnerships. And for a white and black partnership was highly unusual in the South African culture. And let's face it, it's fairly unusual here in the States. So the partnerships that we've developed are based on our shared humanity. I see it more as a hand up, an opportunity to assist versus a handout, which is not a partnership. So some of those partnerships that I would like to share, one of them is Father Michael Lapsley, who happens to be a white, from Australia, white Anglican priest. And he works with the Institute for the Healing of Memories. And Father Michael and I are like brothers. And he's done a lot in terms of apartheid and bringing justice to South Africa. He was damaged physically in a huge way as a result of a letter bomb. He lost both of his arms, he lost an eye, and he continued to fight the good fight. So Father Michael and Arm in Africa, again, are in partnership around helping heal the wounds in South Africa. Another partnership that we have is with the Sisters, Missionary Sisters of Charity. That's a group that was started by then Mother Teresa, who's now Saint Teresa. And we work with her sisters in a community called Khayelitsha, which is a township of 1.2 million people. And we assist them. That community is, for lack of a better term, a throwaway community in South Africa. They are the poorest of the poor, and that was really Mother Teresa's goal, was to reach out to that community. We assist them, and we have from day one in South Africa for over 21 years. We also work with St. Luke's Hospice, which is a large healthcare provider in and around Cape Town. When we first went, again, this was just early on after apartheid ended, it was not at that time, they were not in a position to provide end-of-life care in the Black townships. And the reason given was that there wasn't an address on anybody's house. Well, the truth is nobody had a house. So we purchased a cinder block building and put an address on it. And that brought end-of-life care, hospice care into the townships. That continues to be a strong partnership with us. Another one was J.L. Swanee, which is a Presbyterian church. My first or second time in South Africa, I sat down with the Anglican Archbishop and the Roman Catholic Archbishop, asking them what their experience was in the townships. The Black Anglican Archbishop nor the white Roman Catholic Archbishop could really give me any indication that they had been involved at all in the townships for quite some time. And again, this was in the height of HIV. And so we went into the townships. We went to one called Guguletu, and we discovered a church called J.L. Swanee. And that has become in many ways a big part of our spiritual journey in South Africa. Again, we've been involved with that community. Those were our first cousins, I would have to say, the first cousins that we actually came to know. And we worship with them every time we're there. We also do a food distribution programs primarily geared toward the senior members of that community. And again, the senior members oftentimes, as a result of HIV and now COVID, are providing housing and food for their own families, and sometimes up to 14 and 15 people in one household. So J.L. Swanee is one of our first and one of our strongest partnerships that we have. We celebrate it in a big way.
Oh, does that include the community delegates, volunteers who helped your mission? Go ahead.
It does. So I would say all of our delegates, of which there have been well over 240 to 250 delegates over the years that have gone, all of them know very much their cousins in each and every one of these partnerships. So for them, it's going home, and it's a strong, strong relationship.
And Petros, I would say the wide range of these partnerships, from an orphanage to a women's shelter. We have a partnership with a man whose grandfather is called by many as the person who was the architect of apartheid in South Africa. He spent his adult life trying to reverse what his grandfather's done. A very important partner for us. And one of the things that we feel so good about, and I would say it's probably the newest of our three legs of the stool, is the real strong focus on education. Knowing that the rules, the legal rules, prevented anyone in these townships from having an education beyond the age of 4th grade. And imagine how far that sets a community, a country back. So to see the delegates now be on their hands and knees in preschools, helping this country restart the education process, to see that we now have a partnership with boarding schools, grade school aged children, many of whom, thanks to our very, very committed donors, are going to school for the very first time. And then all the way up to something we're very proud of called FLY. That's fun learning for youth, where mentors are coming back into these townships and communities, professionals who've had success, and they are helping these people at the high school age prepare for college and get into university there. And to be able to see how, as Jim said, this isn't about a handout. This is about the partnerships within the communities growing and seeing the people come back to help those in still these very tough financial and economic situations, to help their brothers and sisters within those communities. It's very inspiring to see, and it's great to be a part of.
Thank you. All right. Yeah, this is inspirational even from a distance. You know, for those of us who used to follow the South African issue for many, many years, and we never heard those stories before. You know, we only know about apartheid, the crisis, and all that stuff. I'm glad. I'm privileged to interview you guys like this.
Thank you, Pedro.
Thank you. Okay. And the next question is, it has been a very unusual past 2 years in the US and around the world. Many non-profit organizations have not survived, and many others who have survived are much weaker financially. How's Arm in Africa doing on those respects? James.
Yeah. Well, like all small organizations, we're challenged to make sure we meet our budget, and we struggle with the fact, it's just the way it is, that our programs can be as large as what we can afford, so we rely heavily as a nonprofit on donations. COVID has provided us a particular challenge the last 2 years in that we've not been able, understandably, to take any delegations to South Africa. So I personally, as president of Arm in Africa, I am homesick beyond words for all of my family and friends, cousins in South Africa. And I'm more than anxious to be able in the near future to be able to get another delegation to be able to go. That said, it was a pandemic that brought us to South Africa. It was HIV. We've gone through now another pandemic with COVID. And I think the silver lining is it has brought us to a point of realizing how deep our relationships are, and that we have to work harder and smarter to make sure that these partnerships survive, because we are committed in the bottom of our hearts that this relationship, this organization, this familial relationship that we have will continue on and on into the future. So we're not going to cower away from any pandemic.
Okay, thank you. Daryl, you want to add something?
Petros, yeah. I would say one of the unexpected surprises was that we were forced to find a larger audience. It wasn't the people who were a part of our church, a part of our community, who have been well aware of Arm in Africa for much of these last 2 decades. when we now had to move toward being more creative in a virtual audience, we're finding people in other cities, other parts of our country are hearing our story. People in other parts of the world, people who now in South Africa are seeing what a partnership can do, people who didn't think partnerships could work. So it has been fun to see how that expansion really has forced us to do things differently, look at things differently. And the bottom line is we have flourished through it. We have continued to grow, and our donors and supporters have been amazingly supportive through this tough time when there have been more needs in South Africa.
Oh. And they probably need more to do for the future. So my next question is, I hear you have a big event, a major event coming soon in this summer. Can you say a few words about that? This way our audience will know.
Absolutely. After 2 years, Petros, of being virtual, we're getting a chance to come together and be face to face. And we look forward to those who want to be a part of hearing the story, hear from some of those partners, and hear the impact that they're making. And for us, July 11th, that's Monday, July 11th, is a very, very big day. It is going to be between 6 and 9:30. It's a bit of a celebration, a homecoming, a reunion, because we haven't been able to get together. And at the same time, cherishing the music, the storytelling that is such a rich part of the culture of South Africa, and having people live and taped to share the joy from that community and the appreciation. And for us at Arm in Arm in Africa, that growing audience is absolutely critical, and we invite others to join that. Our website is www.aiaia.org. Very soon we're going to have all of the details, including the ability to sign up directly from that site. And we are just thrilled to be able to be back face to face for the first time in 3 years after having our primary fundraisers have to be virtual for the last 2 years.
Oh, great.
So we would invite people who have missed that address to contact us to get more information. Again, www.aiaia.org. So we appreciate you allowing us to share that story and to share the richness and the joy and the thankfulness of the people we partner with.
Oh, we thank you more than you thanks us. So for this information, and hopefully this will not be the last. Do you have anything to add, Jim?
Do I have anything more to add?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Petros. I just want to share a story from early on.
Okay.
It was one of the early delegations, and we were in a large township, just learning about all sorts of things. And one of the local black women invited one of our delegates to go with them to go fetch water. And they had to go quite a ways to get to a public faucet for water. And so they walked and they walked and they walked and they walked. And the white woman began to explain to the black woman in South Africa about how we do that here in America, that we have a kitchen, and in our kitchen we have 2 faucets. And then in the bathroom we have several more faucets. And then in the outside of our house we have more faucets. So trying to explain to the local woman that we never find ourselves walking that far for water. And as the local woman is on her way to get water, she's also talking to her neighbors, and she's playing with the kids, and she's having just a total connection while the delegate is trying to explain to her how we get water just in our own house here. And the local black woman turned to the woman, our delegate, and said, "Oh, that must be very lonely for you to not be able to," because for her, going for water was a huge experience of community. So when I talk about Ubuntu, which I know is very clear to African philosophy, and people understand that, in terms of our humanity is so intertwined. And so the question for us in Arm in Arm in Africa from day one has been really, who are the poor people? who are the poor people. And I would say, having done this now for 21 years, we have received such a rich gift of joy in our experience of being there that you ask, how will our organization continue? We certainly appreciate financial support, but I believe it's the joy that we share with our partnerships. It's the joy and the hope in our future. And I will say, as Americans, we've learned a lot from our African cousins about hope and believing in the future.
Thank you again, Jim. Thank you again, Daryl. One more time, the address is www.aiai.org. And definitely we will do a follow-up sometime soon. On that note, we end today's program, but we'll meet you with a different subject next week. Until then, have a nice one. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Petros.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Mama ku, mama sa, mama kusa, mama ku, mama sa, mama kusa, mama ku, mama sa, mama kusa, mama ku, mama sa, mama kusa.